Hi, I'm Theresa Robinson from the University of Reading and the Institute of Zoology, and I'm going to talk to you today about my work in partnership with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and the Natural History Museum, in which we use the Mauritius FODI as a case study to test the effectiveness of a conservation intervention. Conservation interventions are usually intended to improve vital rates, such as survival and productivity. And in an ideal world, all management interventions would be proposed, tested, assessed, and fine-tuned before being let loose on endangered species. But frequently management is ad hoc and not planned as a formal experiment. This can be due to limitations of time or budget and the difficulty of experimenting on small and endangered populations. So how do we know that these interventions are working? Unpacking impacts of management against the background of natural processes, which also impact on the same vital rates, is challenging and it's necessarily retrospective. It requires detailed individual-based data sets, which, when paired with appropriate statistical analyses, can answer some of these questions. The FODI is one of only 8 endemic Mauritius bird species which remain, and in the 1990s there were no more than 100 pairs left, due to habitat loss and exotic predators mainly, and the species was critically endangered. A species management plan produced by the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation identified that a reintroduction onto Île aux Aigrettes, a partially restored offshore islet, was key to protecting the species. The FODIs like the island, and the population expanded rapidly to a carrying capacity of around 500 individuals, which is about 350 adults, and the species has been downlisted to endangered. We see high variation in reproductive success within and across seasons and within and across individuals, and we also see a high variation in mating systems, including monogamy, polygyny, clutch overlap within pairs, and a small amount of polyandry. The conservation management in this species is primarily supplemental feeding, which is offered daily year-round and has been since the first releases onto the islet. Almost all individuals within the population are ringed with an ID band and 2 or 3 colour bands, which allow visual identification with no need for recapture. And the population is monitored in 3 key ways: through attendance at the feeding aviaries. Any birds exhibiting pair bonding or nesting behaviour are followed, and any nests found across the islet are monitored until their conclusion. Fledglings are trapped and ringed at the aviaries, where their social parentage is obvious from the parents' behaviour, and this monitoring effort has resulted in 3 large data sets: a stud book of 650 adults, a data set on more than 1,500 nesting attempts, and a massive resightings data set of all of these birds across the lifetime of the population. For these analyses, we generated derived data sets consisting of a summary of each breeding season for each bird, which includes the number of nests, the number of fledglings, the number of mates, the territory quality, and many other reproductive metrics. The supplementary food is offered at 2 feeding aviaries, and almost all birds on the island access them daily. This is a rough map of the island showing territory outlines. The population started out with 1 aviary here, and partway through the study, a second was added here. This gives us a really important metric of territory quality, which is simply measured on the map. So this territory is better than this one, which is further away from either feeder. In this study, we sought to use these data from this system as a model for unpacking the effectiveness of ad hoc management. Our main hypothesis was that the impact of this management intervention would be spatial, in that birds nearer to a feeder would be more productive than birds with a more distant territory. And we also expected to see natural processes also impacting on productivity at the same time. So in general, there are 2 routes to increasing individual fitness. You can either have more nests per season, or you can have more fledglings per nest. So we modelled seasonal individual productivity as a response to these 2 predictors. The model form was a negative binomial zero-inflated GLMM-ADMB with a log link, because fledglings per season is a count and it is zero-inflated. And it turns out that both terms are important. This plot shows the impact of each component for each sex. Here we have nests per season, and here we have fledglings per nest. And so our next steps were to unpack the impacts of management on both of these metrics, firstly nests per season, and then on fledglings per nest. We modelled predictors of nests per season using an information theoretic approach. This is a model selection approach which tests multiple hypotheses by fitting multiple models to the same data, and it offers a balance between model complexity and fit. We included the widest range of ecological predictors that we had data for. This modelling approach is particularly useful when your data contains multicollinearity, which is often the case with ecological data sets. This means that you have to exclude some predictors from each other. Our baseline was that any pairs of predictors with correlation coefficients more than 0.7 or less than minus 0.7 were modelled separately. So we had multiple models for each sex. We included the bird ID as a random effect in all models to prevent pseudo-replication. We found that GLMER models were over-dispersed in all cases, so we ended up using negative binomial GLMER models. The model sets for each sex were compared using the AIC scores, which is a measure of information lost within each model. And then the model with the lowest AIC score we concluded was the best fit for our data. So some results from our nests per season. Our hypothesis was that the feeders would improve productivity along a spatial gradient, and it turns out that it does. This plot shows the impact of nests per season of various metrics, and it shows that males with a territory further away from a feeder nest less often than those who are closer, and we see a very similar result for females. In addition, we see that males who are non-monogamous, so they overlap lots of nests with multiple females, are more productive than their peers. But conversely, females who are in a pair with a polygynous male do less well. And this is often seen in polygynous species if the male preferentially assists a primary female while leaving the secondary female to raise a brood alone. However, we also see that females who overlap nests with the same male do better. And we think this may be because males can provision older fledglings, which frees up the female to begin a second brood. Some other results from these models. We found only a very marginal impact of territory on mating systems, only a very slight impact of better territories allowing males to be more polygynous. So it appears that there are two main routes to speeding up for this population. You can either have a territory nearer to the feeder or you can overlap nests. And both of these routes allow you to have more nests per season. We also found that social network, assessed as the number of previous partners which remain alive in the current breeding season, is beneficial for some females. And this might suggest a cost in time or energy of forming new pair bonds. We followed a very similar information theoretic approach for modelling fledglings per nest, but here we didn't find any signal of management on this metric. In fact, this particular metric appears to be largely climate driven, in that nests during December, January, February and March have fewer fledglings. This is the monsoon season in Mauritius, and we suspect that the prevailing climate has a negative impact on nests at this time of year. We also found that nests where the female is slightly older have more fledglings than nests where the female is slightly younger. So some next steps for this research. My next chapters will dig into management impacts on population productivity and cohort productivity. And then we will use survival analysis using a package called CMR-CT, which is appropriate for situations with both continuous resampling and a resightings rate of less than 1. We will then use Vortex to create population viability analyses, taking productivity, reproduction and survival parameters from this earlier work to create population growth projections under a variety of different management scenarios. The ultimate goal of this work is to inform management of the eel of Degrette population, as well as future populations on other Mauritius islets. And by the way, the juvenile Fody in this photo is named after my son Leo. So in conclusion, we show a strong, clear, positive impact of management on nesting attempts per season. And we also show that this is a key component of individual fitness for this species. The lack of impact of management on fledglings per nest might suggest that the mechanism here is improving parental body condition, which then allows multiple breeding through an extended breeding season. We also show that it is possible to assess the impact of informal management, but this depends on the quality and quantity of the data that we have available because of the fieldwork effort for the Fody. And we recommend that all recovery programs invest in long-term monitoring, which generates such data. So thanks and acknowledgement, firstly to my supervisors, Ken Norris, Deepa Senapathy and Malc Nicol, also the Mauritian Foundation, the fieldwork team, which were so welcoming when I was on Îles Aigrettes, and also some of our funding partners, the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust and Chester Zoo. And if you'd like to contact me about my work, you can reach me at any of these places. Thank you very much for listening to my talk.